Um, Welcome, Julio. So I'm gonna make an opening statement. This is one of the series in our Division 45 virtual mentorship session, which is hosted by the Student Committee of Division 45. And my name is Yue Li. I am one of the co-chair of the um, mentorship program. And session will be videotaped, so more of our students will be able to access the video online later. So I wanted to thank you for being willing to be our mentor and taking some of an hour of your Saturday and to join us and
Oh,
tell
sure.
our students about internship and self-care. And I'm
Hmm.
gonna give the time to you to introduce yourself a little bit, and then we can go from there.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm Julio Brionez. I am in my last year of doctoral training from University of North Dakota. I'm from California, so I'm very far from home. And I'm doing my internship in Akron, Ohio at the University of Akron's Counseling and Testing Center. So I've been around lots of places, and it's been really exciting to meet different people. And I also work with APAGS, and I'm a member at large General Focus team. So, and before that, I worked with APAGS Convention Committee. So I helped run the APAGS convention with other folks, including Ritu Verma and Heather Dade and Laura Henderson and a few other people that I'm missing, but I'll remember the names at some point. But I have some experience knowing what it's like to live without self-care and to be very, very burnt out and tired and things. So from that, I've learned a lot. But most of what I learned is coming from experience and from a couple of books, which I'm going to cite today, and a couple of articles, which I'm going to cite today. But now that I'm at internship, I've really changed a lot as far as learning about what self-care is like, how it's a part of a lifestyle, not something we just simply do as extra. So I'll be talking today about some of the myths about self-care, and then some of the ways we can make it more radical. And that's not a phrase that I came up with. It's a phrase that I heard from a book. The book is called The A to Z Self-Care Handbook for Social Workers and Other Helping Professionals. And it came out in 2016. It's available on Amazon for very, very cheap. I think it's like less than $20. I think you can get a paperback version. So you can check that out. Let me think other things about me. I'll be scheduled to graduate this August, so I'm excited about that. And I defended my dissertation before coming to internship, so I was ABI for a while. I can talk about that a little bit, and also I just took a job, earned a job at University of Wyoming, so I'll be starting there in August too. So a lot of stuff's happening.
Congratulations.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you. Pretty happy about it. So it's good.
Awesome.
So I can start wherever you'd like. I was going to start with the myths about self-care.
Okay.
Go from there. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great. And if I have any questions, or I think our audience might later have some questions, I'll jump in a little bit. But yeah.
Sure. Yeah, if anybody has questions at any point, you feel free to email me. I'll put my email up on the screen. And I think it's also available through the when you signed up to, but if not, I'll put it up on the screen too, so no worries there if you have any questions or anything else like that. So I'll start off with some of the myths about self-care. Some of these are the ones that I subscribe to as well. So some of them, I'll go over a few. And some of these are from an article written by Margarita Tartakovsky and her writing about 7 damaging myths about self-care. And the first one is that self-care is supposed to be an all-day thing. It's either an all-day thing or it's nothing. And that really is a myth that came up. So you may think, okay, I can't do self-care because I don't have time for it. And granted, if you're working, plus doing grad school, plus have a family and things like that, there's not much time for self-care, and I appreciate that. Another thing too is that, I'll talk about this a bit later, but sometimes we're in situations where self-care is not an option for some other reasons or another. But self-care does not have to be an all-day thing. It can be something that's very, very short. It can be as little as 5 minutes. It'd be great if you had an entire day for it, but I don't know anybody who does, honestly. But if you do, good for you, that's great. But most people, you can engage in self-care in a really small, not large way. There's ways to engage in self-care that are really helpful that we can talk about as we go along. Another myth is that self-care requires resources that you don't have. Most grad students, myself included, we're not all of us are independently wealthy. If you are, great, that's an excellent position to be in. If you have people that could support you, amazing. Some don't, so I'm speaking to everyone here. It does not have to be about resources you don't have. That includes financial, familial, and social resources. You don't need to have anyone really to engage in self-care. You really do need yourself. You don't need hundreds of dollars to do things. You really can do it on a small budget if you'd like to. The other one, and this is one that I took to a lot, is that self-care is optional, or it's an extra thing. What I'm going to talk about today is that self-care is not extra, it's not optional, it's something you want to engage in as a part of your life. So this is kind of a funny thing I heard in a podcast recently, that self-care isn't taught in schools. People talk about you should engage in self-care and do it, but we don't have any classes in self-care. There's not any kind of credits we can earn for self-care, yet it's very, very important. And I have someone I knew many years ago, an undergrad, who was in grad school at the time, and said that their professor wouldn't really allow for self-care because they wanted things done right away. They would call them on weekends, at night, saying, I need this done. And in their mind, self-care wasn't real because our advisors, or in our positions, we weren't allowed to have it. And while everyone's situation is different, or everyone's situations are a bit different, everybody's advisors are a bit different, what I'm talking about is that self-care needs to be a part of our lives like anything else. And so that's what we're going to I want to talk about radical self-care towards the end for today. That's something I want people to know about. Another myth is that self-care is anything that soothes you. That's not really true. A lot of people can get soothed by drinking alcohol, by smoking cigarettes, by doing lots of different things. I'm not coming down on those things. What I am saying is that there are ways that you don't have to engage in alcohol use or abuse, or any kind of substance use in order to feel better. Some people can, and I'm not coming down on that. I'm just saying there's other things to do besides that. That we have to earn the right to earn self-care, or that it's a privilege. That is what I believe too. Being an ethnic minority, I thought my role, and I still do sometimes, that my role is like the worker bee, like the beekeeper, like I have to keep working in order to feel validated. And I'm not sure when that started or why that started. I think it was something to do with my cultural upbringing and my family's upbringing, that you have to work hard to earn honor and work hard to earn respect, which I do believe. And also, we can engage in self-care to be kind to ourselves and to be respectful for ourselves too. And also, there's lots of research out there that says that self-care and non-burnout, if you will, is you do better treatment for clients if that's the case. So if you have if seeing 8 or 9 people a day it works for you, just imagine what those last 2 people are going to get from you at that point. When you're burnt out, when you're tired, it may not be the best therapy or counseling or interventions that you probably give if you have more energy. So the last few are that self-care means making a choice between yourself and others. Self-care is selfish care. It does not have to be like that. You can engage in self-care, and I'll talk about it. It's really good to have self-care partners. It's really funny because I talked to somebody about this the other day, that when I make treatment plans or coping plans or crisis plans for people that are in danger or in suicidal crisis, reach out to a friend, reach out to a buddy, what have you. We don't do that for self-care. I don't do that for self-care. So imagine if we did that for self-care, people would be more inclined to do it. So it could be someone you work out with, somebody you exercise with, someone you walk with, whatever it is. So the last 2 are that self-care is an accessory. And again, it's not. We're going to talk today about self-care being a part of life, and also something you can engage in on an everyday basis if you have time, or to make time. Other myths aren't about self-care per se, but that burnout is a badge of honor. That burnout only happens to weak people or to people that don't have skills. Burnout can happen to anybody. Burning out, not a badge of honor, it really gets people out of the system. And if you're in a really competitive program, you might have hit burnout a few times. If you're in a program that maybe isn't as competitive and people are very supportive of each other, you may have a lot of different duties to do, and you can get burnt out that way too. So even though there's something great about working really hard and working extra, there also is not that many good things about burnout or about working yourself out of a job or working yourself out of health and things like that. Okay, All right. So in talking about this, the other thing I wanted to talk about at this point is self-care being a skill. When I was an undergrad, my self-care needs were a lot different than they are now. Now my self-care needs are much different now that I'm in grad school and when I was in grad school. Grad school is a very, very different experience. You're busy most of the day. Depending on how many research groups you're in, you're busy every day, all night sometimes. And it's very, very easy to let things go that you normally would do. If you're in therapy, like cutting that off, like dropping your counseling, stopping taking walks, stopping exercise, not eating very healthy, you're eating for convenience. You eat whatever's in the dining center, which isn't always the healthiest thing. So it can be very, very easy to fall off and to do, to stop doing self-care, to not engage in it. And so in doing this, it's helpful to check in with your cohort, if you have one. You can check in with your advisor about self-care, if they're involved in that. If you're in a program that doesn't really engender or encourage self-care, then reach out to somebody who is involved. It can be someone in your church or your mosque or any kind of spiritual group that you're in. It can be a family member, it can be a friend, or it can be someone that you look up to. If you don't have an advisor that you can work with very well, then a mentor is a good person, which I'll talk about at the end of today, how to get a mentor. But it's really an ethical thing to do to engage in self-care, and it can be anything that you have a practice for. In just a bit, I'll show you an example of a self-care plan that I've used before, and that is, it's one that you all can use, and it's easy to find and stuff to do there too. So it's important to look at self-care as a skill that you can use, a skill that you can develop. So for example, I have a friend that engages in a lot of yoga and likes yoga a lot. I don't like yoga at all. I did yoga for 8 months. I got nothing from it besides tired. But some people really dig it. I like really, really small things like taking walks at the park. I like checking out museums. I like listening to podcasts. I like watching movies. And I like going out for nice dinners sometimes. That's my self-care activity. Another thing I do is I learn about something spiritual that's different from my own every week or every 2 weeks. And I have a specific day for it. I call it Spirituality Mondays, where I look at a different spiritual connection every 2 weeks to learn something different. So I've learned a lot of great information from Islam, from Buddhism, from Christianity, and I'll be looking into Taoism soon too about different aspects of self-care and spirituality I can learn. So that's one thing that I do. And it's important to find what works for you and what's going to work for you in the time you have and also in the time that you're going to make. If you're not on board with doing self-care and you really do feel like it's extra, completely fine. Make it something that you do either every week or every 2 weeks in a way that it's a part of your life, not something that you just throw on. If you think about exercise, if you're to exercise and just do it a little bit here, a little bit there, wouldn't really make any gains. The idea with self-care, it's like anything else. You build it up into a skill that you can really get really good at. So for me, I had to schedule it and make that time a priority for me and really make some, I wouldn't say difficult, but less comfortable decisions where I have to put my needs and my self-care needs above the needs of like a task I have to complete. And so that can even mean, and this may sound counterintuitive, but it can mean completing tasks when they're assigned and not putting them off. A lot of us like to procrastinate. Sometimes I do too. I've gotten better at it over time. But even procrastination, if you wait till the last minute to complete an assignment, wait till the last minute to complete your hours, wait till the last minute to do X, Y, or Z, then you get really stressed out. That's not really self-care. Self-care could be putting aside time when something's assigned, putting aside time that you would not normally, that you would typically procrastinate, using that time to complete the task, and that way you give yourself more space to actually do something that's really a mindful, conscious awareness type of self-care. And another thing you can try and do is look for a self-care buddy, someone who'll do this with you. Ideally somebody that's in your cohort because you have the same schedule more or less, maybe even someone at your practice site, or if you're on internship, someone at your internship site, a cohort mate there. That'd be someone that you can engage in self-care, because it'd be very, very easy to not do self-care and to let it go away. And that's what could make burnout happen too. And so I'm curious, have you ever experienced, not necessarily burnout, but where you felt like you were letting self-care go away?
personally?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely relate to a lot of the things that you say, and I think you offer really good tips. And I think I'm a third year doctoral student.
Okay.
So I, now looking back last year in my second year, I definitely felt burnout around this time, right before going into summer break. And yeah, so I think that was the first time that I realized how burnout feels like, because I've been through graduate programs and they talked about burnout and self-care, and I just never really realized why that is so important. You know, what is burnout? I mean, I was busy before, but I don't think I've ever actually experienced burnout. And looking back, and I think that that was what it was.
Yeah, it can be very scary to get burnt out. Um, like I mentioned too, a myth before is if it doesn't happen to me or it only happens to certain types of people, burnout can happen to anyone. And if we look at research, burnout happens very, very often in our classmates, and it can be underreported too. But you can look at research that says that graduate students experience burnout and graduate students experience the pressure to perform. And for a lot of people that may be ethnic or sexual minorities, or in some cases, both, they may not, those people may not feel like they have the right to ask for it because it's something that they're not allowed to do. I read an article before, and I didn't understand what it meant in the beginning, but there are some people that feel the oppression can last forever, but the oppression can happen so quickly that we stop taking breaks because that should be for somebody else. Someone else should be able to earn a break. But it's the people that are oppressed, especially those in graduate programs, that can make self-care part of their life. And it's easier said than done, and I appreciate that. What I am saying is this being time of our lives where we're able to make some choices that can last forever, this is at the time to start to do it. So the other thing, this is something, if you're in an organization or a practice site that is not very healthy, that's very toxic, if you're in an environment where self-care, and everybody's burnt out already, when you walk in you can see that, it can be very difficult, once again, to engage in self-care because nobody else is doing it. If you try and ask for days off, you can get shamed for it. If you try and ask for days off, you may not get shamed per se, but you can get that thought, that feeling of nobody else is doing this, so I don't want to do it either. Or in my case, if my dad never had self-care, doesn't know what it is. He's going to work till the day he passes away. So I don't know why I'm laughing about that, but anyway, he's going to work forever, and knowing that, me seeing how hard he worked, I want to work that hard too. But there is importance to engage in self-care. So how to change the environment that you're in is to realize two things. One, that you're a part of the environment, and two, it may be an effect to where if you start to take care of yourself, other people can see that, and it'll create like a ripple effect where other people want to engage in self-care as well. So something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And I kind of following up with what you just said, and I just want to kind of resonate with you with my own experience. Like I said, I've heard about self-care and burnout a few years before I actually got to that point, and I actually wasn't really aware that was burnout. I just know that I was extremely overwhelmed, and I definitely felt anxious, that I more higher anxiety level and poor sleep quality, and that was pretty clear to me that I was in an unusual place that I had never been in my life. And I think the most difficult parts for me when I was in that position is how unmotivated I feel. And I start to realize that burnout is not necessarily a physical constraint or a constraint on your calendar. It's not always indicative just how busy you are, but it's a feeling that nothing is meaningful or motivating or satisfying. And I think
self-care, but like,
oh,
I think someone's talking.
I would have like freaking screen up and see people.
oh yeah, that's okay. We can give some time to. I think we have two participants jump on board, and
Great.
give them some time as well. So I just wanted to say that I think everybody probably definitely experienced burnout in a different way. And I think
Mhm.
for me, the biggest realization is that it's a psychological burn.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did
So
those you have questions or something or want to share?
yeah, we have Mona and Kim on board, and so we are on our session has started for a few minutes, and Julia was just talking about kind of um, some of the myths of burnout, and I wonder if either Mona or Kim, you want to share something or any questions at this point? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Maybe not.
Okay, no problem. Well, if either of y'all have questions, feel free to interrupt me. And I don't really have a schedule. I'll go over things that we're going to get through today, but I have time for questions. Of course, anytime, please. Well, thanks for sharing, Lee. And yeah, there can be, it can climb up quick, and then it can be that emotional burden, that emotional exhaustion, and to where lots of things can suffer: our quality of sleep, our quality of life, our quality of communication. And then it can even support we don't want to hang out with anyone or visit with anybody because we don't want to see us burnt out. And I hear this a lot with clients here at the university is everyone else that in their life, they say they're fine. Everyone looks fine and nobody says that they're having problems. And I hear that so often that I ask myself, is anyone actually really fine, or is everybody really burnt out and unhealthy, but nobody's talking about it? And so sometimes I wonder if that's the reality, or if that's an issue too. So anyway, I don't want to get off on that tangent, but so how to engage in self-care in a radical way. As of right now, I've talked about the myth that self-care is extra, that self-care is an accessory. Self-care can be a radical thing that you do. And this, I'm going to have to pull up the website really quickly. This is from an article from Psychology Today about radical self-care. And what radical self-care is, that it is something that you embrace and that you do as a priority to other things. For the most part, our lives in the States are built up of work and family and work, family, and then education, and then sometimes sleep. And then extra things. And the extra thing, having fun, going out, visiting with friends, that usually is sometimes the last thing that we look at or take care of. And that's true for grad school too. It's completing all of our homework, completing all of our assignments. If you're in any kind of clubs, completing that stuff. If you're in any kind of organizations, completing that stuff. The idea is to move self-care higher in your prioritization, towards either in your top 5 or something that you do as a part of your life. It's the same amount of importance as your schoolwork does. And I'm not saying you spend 8 hours on self-care. You can, but we're talking about doing it in a radical way to where it's not something that you cancel, it's something that you keep every week or every day or whatever works for you. For me, what works is I do self-care things 4 times a month for the most part. So every 2 weeks I do something a bit different. It focuses on spirituality, around mindfulness, around thoughtfulness, and then around my own physical health. And that can be either eating a healthier dinner. Sometimes that I go out to eat and get a nice dinner, or I can get the ingredients to make something that's really homemade. Otherwise, I just kind of do the same thing every day. But it's something a bit extra in that capacity. So whatever connection you can make with whatever your values connect with. If you're a fan of acceptance commitment therapy, it talks about values. So figure out what values that you care about and how can you intertwine self-care into that and make that a priority that you engage in. If you think about solution-focused therapy, you look at what works and what's already worked in the past and how can you make that or leverage that into self-care and to maintaining that. If you like running and running something you typically do, how can you make that a self-care activity? Maybe running in a special place, maybe running for fun as opposed to running for exercise. And running with friends, for example, things like that. There's also the DBT skill about mastery and engaging in a pleasurable activity and mastering that activity, or engaging in emotional work for wellness, and not simply for stabilization or for reducing crisis. Ways that you can use psychology to your benefit. If psychology is learning about yourself and gaining insight, maybe even starting journaling and looking for insights into your dreams. It can be lots of different things for self-care, just to learn more about yourself, especially if you're developing as a psychologist now. Excuse me. This year, and I'm learning a lot about professional identity and what it means to be a psychologist, and also a psychologist in training that's going to be a Latino psychologist. So there are not that many of us, and there might not be many of us for some time. And I think some of that could be because of self-care, because it's not a part of our culture to take care of ourselves. It's a part of our culture to take care of the family and make sure the family is good. But if the entire family do engage in self-care as a unit, that could be helpful too. And again, it doesn't have to be anything big. The self-care I do, it's mostly free. It doesn't cost me very much money to call a friend. It doesn't cost me very much money to take walks. It just costs the money for the shoes, obviously, and the gas to get to wherever I'm going. But there are costs to things, but it's not something that's extra to me. So this is not my idea, but this is from the idea from that book I mentioned earlier, A to Z for Self-Care. It's making smart self-care plans. So I'm going to pull up a sheet really quick for everyone to look at. I should be able to share my screen. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So here we go. Okay. Okay, everyone should be able to see that. It's like, okay. So this is an example of a self-care worksheet that you can use. So it breaks down into four different areas in the beginning. It's the mind, the body, your emotions, and your spirit. It also has space for work, relationships, and two other things. So what it asks you to do is to write what you currently do, if anything. And if you don't, completely fine, you are going to create an exercise that's current for you, whatever that is. If it is journaling, if it is praying, if it is going to synagogue, going to mosque, whatever that connects you with your mind, and whatever that is. For me, it is going on mindful walks is what I do. I listen to the traffic around me, and that's what I pay attention to get my mind in a reset place. For body, what I currently do is I go on walks again. I don't do a whole lot of running that much right now, but I do go on walks. And because of the weather, I can't go out that much, but I try to go to the wellness center to go on walks at least. Emotionally, I call my family every 2 weeks, and we talk just about anything, about everything and anything. And again, for spirit, I mentioned before, I'm learning something different about every kind of spiritual connection that I don't know about. I don't know much about Islam or about Buddhism, but I'm learning more about it every couple of weeks through different readings or different podcasts or what have you. So it's been really, really helpful and really, really great for my practice, because now I know more about what my clients that do practice Islam, some of their connection to spirituality. If they are, then we can share some of that if it's pertinent to their care or what have you. The other part of it is work and relationships. So for work, this is one thing I do for self-care is I try and write notes immediately after I'm done with the session. That way, at the end of the day, I'm not catching up on notes. And that's hard to do. I have to train myself to do that, but I really try and get the note either started or completed in that time between the 10 minutes or 15 minutes between each client, just simply because I don't want to do it at the end of the day. If you're commuting to your practice site, you don't want to stay any later. If you're commuting with someone else, you don't want to make anyone else wait. Or if you're taking the bus or the metro or whatever it is, you want to try and keep your schedule the best you can. For relationships, I try and keep my friendships going. And me and my cohort from UND, we do monthly Google Hangouts where we all talk and update each other on what we do and what we're doing. So that's been pretty fun too. And that's really the crux of it. What makes this helpful is it's something you can check in on every week or every day, whatever the case may be. And also, it's important to make these SMART. Everyone should, I think, know what SMART is, but I'm going to pull up really quick the SMART acronym. is it? There it is. Okay. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
So I'm going to make that a little bit bigger so people can see it a bit more. But SMART is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So when you create self-care plans, it's important for them to be specific. A self-care plan that says I want to be happier, and healthier isn't really going to do much. So figure out what, if anything, that you want to engage in that makes you healthier. For me, a specific thing that I do is I take walks every 2 weeks around campus. Or excuse me, I take walks every day around campus after lunch. And it's about 3 blocks that I walk. It's not very long, it's about 9 minutes. But I do that every day after lunch to make sure I clear my head and give myself some perspective of the weather. And it's reasonable. I can do that with 9 minutes. I don't take a whole lot of time. And it's time limited. I do it every day. So if I don't, I'm accountable for that. But the entire thing is I make sure I do it every day. For the Spirituality Mondays, I do it every second Monday. And I practice something for an hour. And it's really easy for me to do. And it's reasonable. It doesn't cost me very much time. And I get something out of it. I learn something about a different culture's spirituality, a different religion's spirituality every couple of weeks. So it's really, really helpful. I just learned a lot about grief in Islam very recently, and I learned a lot about how folks that practice Islam and Muslims engage in really, really spiritually based and very loving grief work with one another. So it was a really helpful thing to learn. So that's one thing I make sure to do when you do engage in things like self-care, to make sure that when you complete sheets like this, that all of the things that you do are SMART, and that's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Okay. So anybody have any questions as I start to wind down for the time being?
Thank you so much for sharing the tips and the SMART goal and also the self-care worksheet. That seems really helpful in terms of breaking it down to different categories, and I think just simply by looking at it can help a person to evaluate in what areas have they engaged in self-care and what are some areas that's still lacking.
Yeah. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is mentorship, and this is a big deal. So I got involved in 2 different types of mentorship, and one is through the Minority Fellowship Program through APA, and the other one is through SAS. Students Division 17 had a mentorship piece. So if you have not, and you're a graduate student and you have not applied to be a part of the Minority Fellowship Program, do a quick Google search. You can look up MFP APA or APA MFP and put an application in. It's a great way to find a mentor that is from a cultural background and has a lot of relevance. So I was really lucky to get partnered and mentored with Dr. Michael Go and at University of Minnesota, who's been really, really great. Very, very kind, very, very open. The program is really excellent. You meet with lots of different people and can really mentor very, 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 very practically and very, very easily. When finding a mentor, it's important to look at a few different things. What you might have in common with them personally and professionally. So the best ways to do this that I've found are to either go through your or APA or CPA, whatever you're involved in, or your local psychology organization, and check out what the people that are doing research or work are doing and reaching out. It may sound very simple and obvious, but it really is a big deal to reach out to some of these folks and ask them for any kinds of tips or advice you might give a new professional, and maybe even if they consider meeting for coffee or a chat or what have you. And a lot of folks will. Some might not, obviously, because they're very busy, but some will, or some may at least have the idea that you are looking to partner with them or mentor with them. And it's a really great way to do it. And it doesn't have to be someone in psychology either. It can be anybody that you might admire that can give you sage advice. It might be someone in your spiritual connections. It might be somebody in your family. It might be someone in a different professional role that you are in. A mentor does not have to be psychologically bound. They can be from any kind of walk of life. It's someone that you can look up to and that you can trust, that can confide in. I just cite MFP because it was a really good experience and one that's still open right now to apply to.
Thank you for sharing. And mentorship seems to be a really important piece as well in terms of having the role model and having someone who can kind of guide you along the way.
Oh, yes, very much so. Thanks to my own advisor, Dr. Navarro and Dr. Go, learning what a teaching statement was, learning what a research statement was. Those aren't things I knew. And so they're able to give me examples to follow and to work with. So it was a really, really helpful and fun thing. And it was really good.
But you have someone new that joined the call, and I don't know if they're ready to with us.
Sounds kind of rough.
I was wondering, kind of having a question for our participants in terms of you being on internship, and it seems like you're really at the end of the tail of the program. And so I was wondering, what's your experience with self-care throughout different stages of your program, and especially when you're on internship, and I'm sure, and you have secured a job already,
Yeah.
and I'm sure before you have a job and applying, and that was a really, really nerve-wracking time, and especially sometimes our doctoral career involves a lot of moving and making family priorities right as well. So I was wondering, what was your experience with self-care and manage your time throughout different stages in the doctoral program?
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, when I first got to North Dakota, I didn't know anybody, for one. I'd never been to the state before. The weather was very, very difficult, and the social climate was a lot different than I was used to. So self-care changed a lot over time. So when I first got there, self-care was getting to know people and putting myself in the position to where I could feel comfortable. Developing a routine was really important. And then once I started to at least get a routine together, then I was able to branch out a bit more. And I was able to meet some other Latino people on campus, and some other people of color on campus as well. And I was able to get involved at the wellness center, and I was able to go to cycling classes and things that were on the earlier side, but I was able to get exercise that way. And I was able to start doing a lot more running, which was really, really helpful. And I met a couple of friends that were into running, and we did a lot of running, and that was really, really great. And that was something that another classmate of mine did together. So we ran at UND, they have the Green Gallop, so we ran that together, which was pretty fun. So that was good. Another thing was making the commitment to finish dissertation before I left for internship. So that required me to make some self-care sacrifices, if you will, and that is to not go out as much and to really try and get my dissertation done. So I saved money because I wasn't going out very much, but it was a lot of spending time at the library, spending time at home, getting work done, and then completing tasks and reaching out to people and getting stuff done as quickly as possible. And my self-care shifted then because I was doing less running, so I got into other things, just like lifting weights, and then going to museums and things to clear my mind was really helpful too. And then talking to people that had completed it, had been farther along in the program. So at the time, Students of 17, or SAS, had a mentorship program. And so I was able to connect with a mentor there, and we would chat every 2 weeks about how I was doing, how they were doing, and it was a really, really, really great time, and really, really helpful stuff. I got a lot of great advice on how to work with my committee, how to get things done, so that was really, really helpful. And once at internship, that was yet another move. The difficulty of that was, one, realizing that you're going to be in an office the entire day, and that wasn't something I was used to. I was not used to being in an office from 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 sometimes, so that took a lot of getting used to. The other thing was I like it here a lot. I like the program, I like the staff. I'd work here if I could. But everybody tells you, you read a lot about internship nightmares and things. But the other aspect is that if you like it a lot, it's a sad thing to leave. So there's preparing for liking your internship site and having to leave for that. So how have I been well here? Walking is one, talking with the staff and letting them know that I like it here a lot and being more communicative with them. And a lot of us get together and we do internship lunches for my internship cohort. And here they care about self-care a lot. So we go out to lunch as a group twice a month, and we just talk about how we're doing, what's new, that kind of a thing. So that's pretty helpful too. And then a lot of us, they have a dog walking thing here at one of the shelters here in Akron. So every Thursday and Monday and Thursday, we can go walk dogs after work, which is free and it's fun and that kind of a thing. But through it all, it was really keeping my goals in front of me and placed my values of hard work and wanting to give myself space to have options and things. So a lot of times it was not going out and it was getting tasks done. Self-care was getting myself ready professionally. And self-care was doing my own personal work and therapy too. And also self-care was knowing that what I wanted to do professionally, knowing that I want to work in clinical work for the most part. I really started to make different goals around that. And that would taking different research positions and taking different types of advocacy to get better at doing that craft, doing that stuff. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you were very intentional and thoughtful about getting resources around you, either socially and also just for yourself to build around self-care. And also, I really like the point that you mentioned earlier, and also just now, that sometimes setting priorities and taking the time to work rather than procrastinate is actually a form of self-care. And I think that's a really nice point.
Yeah. Procrastination's a tough one because it's very easy to put things off. But like most grad students, you have 5 other things to do all the time. And so I think when you mentioned burnout before, I think when I realized I was burnt out was when I had nothing to do and I was scared because what am I missing? What am I not doing? So that's when I realized I was burnt out because I wasn't able to relax at all. So that was helpful to recognize that.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. So we have one participant on call. I was wondering if you have any questions, and I can unmute and see if there's any questions. We have about just a few minutes left, and if there's any thoughts or reflections, questions, feel free to share.
Sounds like they're walking or something.
Yeah. Well, maybe not. Okay, that's okay.
I'll put my email up here on the screen really quickly so people, if you want to email me or ask questions or anything.
Okay, sounds good.
That's my email there. It's my first name dot my last name at Gmail. I'll be happy to send you the worksheets that I have, or the information that I have, or if you have any questions, or if you have self-care advice or tips, please let's share them. Let's all work as a community to get this together. And when you engage in self-care, if you can get some self-care partners, it can be very helpful, and accountability partners to make sure you're doing your self-care. And we have partners for lots of different things, for AA, for NA, and for all these different things. We don't have them for self-care for the most part. But it's important to look at self-care as another part of our health that we want to keep going.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds like a great idea. So I just wanted to thank you again for being here on a Saturday and sharing all of those tips with self-care. And personally, I think I've learned a lot, and I'm sure more students will watch this session later and being able to access to the information. And